Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's time to start, even though some people are still coming through. My name is Noma Zondo. I'm the Executive Director of Corporate Relations. I'd like to welcome everyone here. Program Director, Dr. Opondo. I would also like to express a warm welcome to our guest speakers this afternoon. The director for the Consortium for Refugee and Migrants in South Africa, Mr. Efuli Sintumule, Director of Social Refugee Services, Ms. Yasmin Rajan, Mr. Christopher Jumba, a UKZN international student. A special welcome to all our guests from other universities and organizations in South Africa and on the African continent, academics and professional staff, students, officials from government departments, guests from NGOs, alumni, the media, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our special webinar. We are honored to host this webinar on World Refugee Day. Today, millions worldwide are united in their excuse me, in their admiration and also the courage of those individuals who have had to leave behind their homes due to conflict or persecution. Our discussion today centers around an evocative theme, finding freedom. The theme couldn't be more relevant as numerous individuals leave their homelands each day and embark on dangerous journeys in search of safety and freedom. Therefore, with this webinar, we aim to bring into focus the struggles refugees face in their quest for safety and the hardship they endure in their new surroundings. This is important as refugees continue to face harsh measures that infringe on their rights in their host communities. We take this moment to honor those brave individuals, acknowledge their struggle, and also salute their positive contributions to their host countries and communities. We are fortunate to have a panel of distinguished guests for this discussion who will help us dissect the theme. We are also confident that this webinar today will enlighten and enrich us all. With that, I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar. We appreciate your presence and look forward to an engaging and thought-provoking discussion. Thank you so much. Before I leave the podium, I would like to introduce our facilitator this afternoon, Dr. Patricia Opondo, who is an applied ethnomusicologist and also a senior lecturer in the African music dance at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She is also the director of the African Music Project and curates the African Cultural Calabash Festival. She has served on the ICTM Executive Board as the chair of the ICTM Study Group on African Music. She was also instrumental in the University of KwaZulu-Natal hosting the 40th ICTM World Conference and the first ICTM Symposium. She was also appointed to the South African Ministerial Committee for the National Indigenous Music Project to formulate a national strategy and plan for the collection, preservation, and promotion of indigenous music of South Africa, with the ultimate objective to re-engineer the national sound, film, and video archives. With those few words, I would like to hand over to Dr. Opondo to take us through the session this afternoon. Thank you so much, Dr. Opondo. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zondo. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to World Refugee Day. Our first speaker is Mr. Tifufulu Fleli Situmule, or Mr. Fulu, the director of the Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa. The acronym is CORMSA. Having joined CORMSA in August 2012 as an advocacy officer, in 2015, he was appointed the National Program Coordinator, leading to his appointment as the acting director in January 2018. And later in April 2018, he was appointed the executive director for CORMSA. Fulu possesses vast institutional memory for CORMSA and migration experience. Fulu arrived with a solid human rights background, having worked for Black Sash Trust as a paralegal advisor, where he led the refugee task team, as well as social auxiliary worker and research field worker experience for various organizations. He recently completed his diploma in labor law from the University of Johannesburg, certificate in project management from the University of Cape Town, and certificate in report writing from the University of Pretoria, which he built on a BA in social work and a certificate in sociological research. He's undertaking a certificate course on leadership management with the University of Stellenbosch. His main interest is the human protection and access to basic services by asylum seekers, refugees, and other international migrants in South Africa, with a particular focus on children and women. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mpondo. I never realized that I've got such a lengthy and very rich background and CV. Yes, thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you very much for the University of KwaZulu-Natal for offering us an opportunity to be part of this webinar and to join quite a number of participants on this special day, the World Refugee Day in 2023. I have prepared a few slides, not many, because I believe that today we should be doing a lot of talking and interacting with the audience who have joined us. If maybe we can start with my presentation. I'll just share the slides. Thank you very much. As you can see from my first slide, my topic is the refugee rights are human rights too. Is the one that I will be focusing on, that will build in on the topic that the University of KwaZulu-Natal has actually emphasized, that talks to what it means to be free. I will firstly just give a brief background about the Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa. It's a national network of 25 member organizations in good standing, whose main objectives and mission and the promotion and protection of the human rights of asylum seekers, refugees, and other international migrants in a ways that promotes well-being of all in South Africa, the SADC region, and globally. In our members, we are based in 5 provinces, which is the Western Cape and Eastern Cape province, Limpopo, Gauteng, and the KwaZulu-Natal province. Our membership is comprised of the academia, activists, community groups, researchers, legal organization, humanitarian assistance organization, as well as the psychosocial support organizations. So CORMSA, in short, works in 4 programs. That is network coordination and strengthening, because we are a membership-based organization by ourselves. Hence, we are called a consortium. And then we also have a program that we call advocacy and lobbying. This project looks at issues of policy development and policy implementation for inclusivity, and to deal with issues of discrimination and exclusion. We make input in any policies that is being developed, and we also make sure that all the policies that are implemented in South Africa are in line with the South African Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights. We also have what we call capacity building and trainings, which is a program that focuses mainly on building the capacity of the civil society organizations the asylum seekers and refugees and migrants themselves, the labor movement, officials, including the public servants, so that we can have an inclusive society on issues relating to human rights protection and strengthening. We also have the fourth program that we call Rights, Education, Awareness Raising, and Educational Material Development for Distribution, because we believe that by raising awareness and promoting the information that talks to human rights, we can build a cohesive society in South Africa. To begin, my core focus of the day, the World Refugee Day 2023 theme, the University of KwaZulu-Natal, as it was actually alluded by the first speaker during the introduction in terms of what does it mean to be free, which is quite a very big and very diverse theme, because it talks to issues of equality, it talks to issues of freedom, it talks about equal rights, it talks about freedom of movement. So it highlights the broader spectrum of issues that refugees in particular, they need to enjoy when they are in a host countries. And then we also have the global theme, as you will know, that this day in particular belongs to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. And this year's theme is Hope Away from Home, which simply directly means that there is a hope for refugees in their respective host countries, wherever they are, including South Africa. As you will remember, that South Africa as a country, it is also a member of the international community. And we also have what we call obligations to promote and protect the rights of refugees and asylum seekers who are in a country, including the other international migrants that we normally call them economic migrants. But in our organizational context, we always say that in a refugee context, it is when refugee rights are considered and respected as human rights too, because you will recall, or maybe you have witnessed, or maybe you have heard that whenever we are engaging as a country, when we talk issues of refugees and asylum seeker protection, the human rights of asylum seeker and refugees, in many occasions, they tend not to be recognized as an equal right as those of citizens. You will know that refugees and asylum seekers, they are afforded the equal rights as of those of citizens, except the rights to vote and form a political party. We normally call them political rights. And these rights that we always talk about, they have been enshrined in the South African constitutions and through other legal instruments, like the instrument of the 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 protocols that South Africa has signed into. Because you will remember that once a country signed and ratified the international treaties or convention or a protocol, they will have to then domesticate that protocol and develop its own national legislation or its national policy or law. In the South African context, the South African government actually developed what we call the 1998 Refugee Act. And there is also the 1948 Universal Declaration of the Human Rights. As you will know, that when you start talking about the refugee rights, you need to be talking about what the country has signed up for in terms of the international or global level. And the rights that we are referring to, these are the rights that when I said, or when we engaging on the refugee rights are human rights too, these are the rights that we are actually referring to. And of course, some of us who works on this field, we have actually seen that quite a number of these rights are not being respected, are not being recognized. If they are not being recognized, they are not even being implemented or afforded to the refugees as they have been alluded on the convention and within the Refugee Act. We have got the right not to be expelled except under certain strictly defined conditions. And in that right, in a current situation when we commemorate this day, we have seen quite a number of challenges that refugee faces when they have to renew their documentations, when they have to extend their stay in the country so that they can be protected and they cannot be arrested and detained. You will remember that under the Refugee Act of 1998, refugees are granted two sets of permit, which is Section 22 permit We normally call it an asylum seeker permit, and then we have what we call Section 24 permit, which is the recognized status that we call refugee status. And we also have the right not to be punished for illegal entry in the country, in the territory of a contracting state. By that, it means the host country, because we know that refugees in particular, they are fleeing war and they are fleeing persecution from their home country. And they thought we should go to other country, or we should flee to other country to seek refuge or to seek protection. So they should not be denied an entry in that country. And then they also have the right to work. If you bring the right to work in a South African context, as you will remember that the migration policies in South Africa, they have been developed or designed on what we call social integration approach. By that, I mean, if you entered a country either illegally or legally, and then you have to report within the refugee reception offices of around the country, and you declare that you have got the intention to apply or to seek refuge in the country, then once you are issued with Section 22 permit, you have to survive. And the means of survival, it's livelihood, and livelihoods entails work. And we also have the right to housing, which also involves shelter. It also involves the issue of right to education, right to public relief and assistance. And when you talk about right to public relief and assistance, we are referring to issue of right to healthcare services. And you will remember that within Section 27 of the South African Constitution, it clearly states that no one can be deprived access to primary healthcare services, including emergency healthcare services and sexual and reproductive health rights. And you also have the right to freedom of religion that you practice or that you belong to, and the right to access the courts, as you will know and recall and be aware that once you have got the access to courts, you can exercise the right to justice, and you can have right to justice as well. And then right to freedom of movement, because once you are in a country, if you have to go to and from to work or study or to access education, you need to have the freedom of movement and the right to be issued with an identity and travel document. As I have actually alluded, when we commemorate this day, refugees have got the right to be issued with two sets of permit, which is Section 22, which we call an asylum seeker permit, and then Section 24, the refugee status. So those are the rights that we are referring to that needs to be actually respected and recognized. Hence, we are actually saying refugee rights are human rights too, because without the recognition and the respect of these rights, refugees will not be, will feel threatened, will feel unwelcome. And we have seen a lot of sporadic social ills that has been taking place in our country. And those sporadic social ills that we are experiencing in our country is because quite a number of the host country citizens and other people that are living within the country, they don't understand what are the rights of refugees and who are the refugees in particular. So these are some of the issues that we need to be engaging and we need to be observing when we talk about this World Refugee Day today. And then we also have some a recommendation that we, as an organization, we are saying if we actually address these issues, we need to deal with the enactment of the hate speech and hate crime bill. We just did the submissions a few weeks back, and the bill has been on the radar and before the parliament portfolio committees for quite some time, over a decade now. So we are saying if that bill, the hate speech and hate crimes bills, can be fast-tracked, it can actually help to address some of the social ills that we are seeing within the country. The social ills that we are referring to is the xenophobic attacks that we are seeing, xenophobic speech, and some hatred that are directed to refugees and the members of the LGBTQI+ group. And we are also saying we need to strengthen the National Action Plan to combat racial discrimination, racism, xenophobia, and related intolerance, because we do have such kind of a policy within the National Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. And we are saying that we need to develop an inclusive social cohesion strategies, and we implement those strategies in accordance to our constitution, because you will remember that our constitution, it says South Africa belongs to everyone who live in it. And refugees and asylum seekers, they are part and parcel of everyone and people who are living within the South African borders. And we are saying we should have more education and awareness raising on the rights of refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa, so that and ordinary citizens who's based in Dutwa, who's based on Mahlabathini, who's based in Mgugundlov, who's based in Loistrashat or Toyando, they should be able to know who are the categories of people that they are living with in their community so that they can understand their plight and their concerns. And we are also saying we need to continue the dialogues and engagement on issues of concern that triggers social ills, because you will remember that every time when there are divisions in our communities, in particular xenophobic attacks or xenophobic violence, you will find that there are issues of concern that triggers those retaliation or those social ills that leads to the hatred that is directed to refugees and asylum seekers and migrants who are living within South African borders. In my last slide, I just thought it will be important for us to also project and understand when we talk about a refugee of whom we are commemorating their day to day. It's someone who fled his or her home or country owing to a well-founded fear of persecution because of his, her race, religion, nationality, membership in particular social group, or political opinion. This is according to the United Nations 1951 Refugee Convention, of which South Africa has signed and ratified. Hence, they have actually developed and currently implementing the 1998 Refugee Act to make sure that refugees and asylum seekers, when they are in a country, they are regulated and they are protected. And we also have the graduating stage that we normally call an asylum seeker, because before you become a refugee, you start by being an asylum with the intention of becoming a refugee. Those are some of the information that I thought I should share. But in overall, when we are commemorating this day, is to raise awareness on the resilience, the courage of refugees who have actually decided that let's move or let's go to other countries that can accept and receive us with open hearts, and we can actually save our lives from those countries. And it happens that South Africa is one of those countries that has signed and ratified the 1951 convention that compels them to host refugees. And by signing that convention, it simply translates on the issues that South Africa can produce and South Africa can receive refugees. I shall stop there for now, and then we will engage much further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very strong presentation. And I like the opening that refugee rights are human rights too. So we'll move on to, can you just stop sharing the screen, please? Thank you. All right, we'll take all the questions and discussions at the very end. Please remember to put your questions in the Q&A box. Now let me introduce our second speaker, Ms. Yasmin Raja. Ms. Raja is the Director of Refugee Social Services in the Durban office. Yasmin Raja is a social worker by profession. She has been in the refugee sector since 2003. The Refugee Social Services is an NPO that provides psychosocial services to refugees and asylum seekers in KZN. Previously, her work spanned in the child protection sector. Yasmin strongly believes in an inclusive society where everyone attains the right to equality, dignity, and justice. Welcome, Yasmin.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the organizers of this webinar for actually inviting me. Sorry, I forgot to put the video on immediately. Yes, my name is Yasmin Raja, and I chose to speak about documentation as a road to freedom. As my colleague Fulu has so eloquently put into place that human rights are refugee rights as well. I thought the best way to actually approach the subject of attaining these human rights was actually to talk about the issue of documents. So as we all know, from the cradle to the grave, we need documents, okay? And these documents are usually provided by the duty bearers in the countries in which we live. I suppose many, many years ago when we didn't have borders and we didn't have the population that we have now, where movement was a little bit more restricted, and people stayed in their communities, it wasn't that necessary to have something to verify that you were a human being, and that if you moved into another space, that you needed to verify who you were. So if we look, and I'd like all of us to just first and foremost think about what we would do. Those of us that are sitting here probably all have documents. I'm making an assumption. And what would happen? What do we use it for? How often do we have to use it for? If you look at anything that we do every day, when you have a child born, first and foremost, you have to have your own documents to register your child so that your child can get a birth certificate. Okay. You also then need that birth certificate to get the child into school. You need your parents, as a child, you need your parents' documents to get into school. If you needed health services, you need to produce your documents so that you can access that. Because we're always being asked to verify who we are as human beings, okay? And so the documentation issue is a gateway. Your document is your gateway to protection. It's your gateway to verify that you're actually, to access your rights, to verify that you're a human being and that you actually belong. And what often happens is that when you're an asylum seeker or refugee, you sometimes leave your space. Well, most times you leave your space, not always having your documentation with you. And when you get into a new country, the first thing that you're asked to produce is verification of who you are and have you got permission to cross over into this border and come into this country. I mean, Fulu talked about refugee conventions and the things that we actually sign, the Declaration of Human Rights. All of those things are documents and contracts that we make with each other as human beings so that we can exist on this earth and engage with each other in some sort of way that has some rules and regulations. But what we don't see often is the people that fall through the cracks because they can't access these particular documents. In the case of asylum seekers and refugees in South Africa, the reason I thought it was important that we talk around documentation was because South Africa, in South Africa, we have an issue. We have a huge challenge when it comes to documentation. Our policy is very progressive. It allows, so we signed on the Convention on the Rights, we signed on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We've signed on to on the 1951 Convention accepting and recognizing refugees and asylum seekers in the country. And we put into place the refugee reception officers that actually give you the document that allows you to have the freedom of movement, to work and to study, to access health services, to access education, and to do all the things that you need to do in South Africa while you're here. So our policy is pretty solid. However, and this is where the issues come in, to get that freedom of movement and freedom to be and to integrate in South Africa, we need a Home Affairs that actually works properly. And currently, one of the biggest challenges, most of the people that I engage with on a daily basis, one of the biggest challenges is the access to the documentation. So over the years, since we domesticated the Convention on the Rights of Refugees and Asylum Seekers, and we put in the laws, as it were, for asylum seekers and refugees to be accepted in the country and to move around with freedom of movement and to work and study, we the Department of Home Affairs is charged with the duty to actually provide the documentation. So your Section 22 permit, your Section 24 refugee, the Section 22 being the asylum permit, the Section 24 being the refugee, the recognized refugee status document. And then moving on from there, in the event that you want to, and you've been here long enough, you can actually apply for permanent residence and later on for citizenship. Unfortunately, what we have in South Africa currently today is that if you come in as a new asylum seeker, the likelihood that you can make an application for your asylum seeker permit and get it within a reasonable period of time is next to nothing. New asylum seekers need to actually apply online for an appointment to have an interview so that they can put their case forward and start the process of actually getting an asylum seeker document. I don't have stats, but I could easily say there's thousands, probably 100,000 or maybe less than 100,000 people actually waiting for appointments so that they can get that first document. Secondly, they need, they will need to be when their children are born. So imagine you don't have a document. So you don't have an asylum seeker document, or you don't have a refugee status document. We often see women that are pregnant that come in and give birth at the hospitals in South Africa. So they get the service because some organization has actually advocated for them to get services, or because the people that are running the hospitals realize that all in South Africa, need to be treated if they have health issues. And then we find that when the child needs to be registered, the birth needs to be registered, the mom is going to be asked, or the parents are going to be asked for their own documents. And if they don't have, they might have a document from home, but that's not good enough. They need to have a valid either asylum seeker permit, refugee permit, or another valid immigration permit. Otherwise, our South African government will not register the birth. This leads to other problems going forward, because your child then will grow up and we might be able to access schooling and all sorts of other things, but your child will then grow up. When she reaches 18, the lawyers or whoever might have helped her to get through school, to write that matric, even without a document, the likelihood that she can get into, for instance, UKZN is less than nothing, because she doesn't have a document, okay? And these are the things that we're dealing with on a daily basis in South Africa. So I'd like to put the person now into this. It's a very, just saying, okay, we all know we need documents. I think if you were to put yourself in the situation of somebody without a document, you'll realize that, hey, I can't open this. I cannot study any further. I can't travel because I can't get a passport. And so these, this is why the road to freedom comes with documentation. I was doing a presentation with some people in Ikopo a few months ago, and a teacher said to me that they had a number of children in their schools who were not documented, migrant children that were not documented. And she said that they moved around like ghosts. You're invisible. And it made me think that even though you're a human being, you can't access any of your rights if you don't have that piece of paper that says you have a right to be here, you belong on this earth, and you can actually get what is due to you. Also access your opportunities. So oftentimes when we talk to clients in this office, and we see a number of clients, the biggest stressor in being in South Africa is the fact that I don't have a document. And because I don't have a document, I'm likely to actually be picked up and deported. So I'm scared about that. And then the organizations that have developed in the past few years, I think the last 2 or 3 years, that have been targeting what they call illegal migrants who are supposedly taking our jobs and stuff like that. One of the things they ask for is also your documentation. So I think what I would like to say most in this, what I would like to actually bring to the fore is, as the audience sitting here listening to this thing and understanding what this piece of paper, this ID document, your asylum seeker document, your refugee permit, a birth certificate for your child, it all comes as a gateway, as a ticket to you accessing opportunities, work, livelihoods, also much stuck, and you're not able to do what you were meant to possibly do on earth. I mean, imagine if one of the leaders, I'm a bit, I haven't thought about it, but imagine if, say for instance, Einstein or Nelson Mandela had no document. Where would they have? Would they have been where they are, or would they have attained and added value to society without having these documents? Would they have been able to do what they need to do? How many Einsteins, how many Nelson Mandelas, how many leaders and people that would add value to society are being left behind because they have no documents? And when it's a refugee or an asylum seeker that has come through to the country, how many of them are not able to fulfill their potential simply because, and add value to South Africa, simply because they don't have a document, and because Home Affairs is taking a long time to process documents. I mean, with the new applications, we've been told that appointments are going into December of next year. I might be wrong. I know for a fact that they are going into December of this year, but there was a colleague that said to me that they saw some appointments going as far as December next year. With an asylum seeker document, it gives you limited rights. I think it's important to just note that we have a number of people who are on appeal. There's a backlog project who have been using an asylum document for many years, which they need to renew on a regular basis, and that comes with its own challenges. And with that, it means that in the event, after 10 years of being in limbo, your case is adjudicated, because this is what happens. You tell your story to Home Affairs, and they'll decide whether or not you have a refugee claim. What then happens if after 10 years you are rejected? In that 10 years, you might have married somebody, you might have children. Your children know no other country but this one. And if you're born to refugee parents or asylum seeker parents, you don't automatically get nationality in the country. So what then happens to you? And these are things that are challenging our clients on a daily basis. You see the stress, you see the trauma, you see how people are unable to fulfill their potential. You see people being involved in precarious work, being exploited, all on the basis of not having a document. So maybe a few of the recommendations I'd like to make. first of all, for us as people that are documented and people that might have a right to be in South Africa and everything is okay, is when you come across petitions or a way to lobby our government to say we need to actually streamline the processing of documentation. Home Affairs is central to every person in the country. Can we actually look at ways in which this particular department gives 100% service? We also need to ask and appeal to the Minister of Home Affairs to change some of the regulations as it comes to the registration of births of children born to foreign nationals, like saying, you know, why do we need a valid document? Does for a valid current document for a parent to register the birth of a child? Is there another way in which the child's birth can be registered without us having to make sure that, you know, the parents' documents are all current and up to date? Because keeping a document current and up to date is a problem. And I'm sure the refugees amongst the audience will have lots and lots of experience with keeping your documents current. Those people that also you can't always remain. Hopefully, people that are here and have been here for a certain number of period of time will want to actually become citizens, and maybe some of those processes need to be revisited so that we can look at how best we keep the talent that refugees and asylum seekers bring into the country, instead of being discriminatory and excluding them on the basis of nationality. And I think I'm going to just stop right there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Yasmin. My heart gets heavier when I listen to you, because, you know, you're so right. Documentation is the road to freedom. And if you can't even get your child's birth certificate, it's really problematic. All right, but before we open up the discussion, our final panelist, I think maybe the most important, because we'll hear about his personal journey, is Mr. Christoph Juma, who's currently studying towards a postgraduate diploma in marketing and supply chain management in the College of Law and Management Studies at UKZN. Christoph is originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So go ahead and let's hear about your reflections of your journey to South Africa.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. And allow me to firstly share my screen. Okay, I believe, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to thank for this opportunity to the International Relations Office for making it possible for me to present. Thank you for the trust. Thank you to UKZN. It's a blessed home to be. And thank you to SCI Foundation for giving me another chance to study at such prestigious institution such as UKZN. In starting, also I would like to thank my family, my parents, and everyone that has contributed to my life, and everyone that has made the man that I am today. As a start, a reflection of my journey to South Africa, allow me to read this quote that I wrote just a few days ago when I was asked to prepare this presentation. The quote goes as, we are refugees not by choice, but by a decision. Right, and these decisions, they are made by force, in which we leave our homelands due to circumstances that might threaten our lives. So we have no choice but to make these decisions. It's either we stay and die, or we go and survive. The first point is my journey and finding freedom as a refugee in South Africa. I moved to South Africa and became a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Both the push and the pull factors influenced this move. During the 1996 to 2006, war broke out within the provinces of South Kivu and North Kivu in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was caused mainly by the political instability within the country. A war-torn environment made it difficult for me, not only me, and those that were also affected in that war during that time. So it made it difficult for me to basically thrive in my home country, basically to survive. And a country that was developmentally better than my own, which I could afford to go, was South Africa as a destination. You know, I always say South Africa is just like it is an American country in Africa, to say. So arriving in South Africa in Durban was another way in finding my freedom. I arrived here with health problems due to poor diet and unfavorable living conditions that I encountered in the camp on my way to South Africa. The process of obtaining the asylum seeker temporary visa wasn't easy, as I had to wait for a year in order to obtain it, because my first interview was rejected and I had to work on my statement and do another interview. Otherwise, I will be deported back to DRC. And we all know those that goes to Home Affairs, you really have to give a proper statement. Otherwise, you will be returned back home, and that is not a good thing to hear. And you can see I tried to put a picture so that people out there could really see a picture in stories as to how people are living in other parts of Africa. You know, and the first picture shows that there are soldiers there. It's a war, and you can see the next picture. It's a mother and a child, and she is trying all her best to run in order to save the baby. And the second picture shows a parent trying to move on to another destination in a way they can find comfort and be safe, you know, because where they are coming from, it is not safe, and the only choice they have is to pack everything and leave. The next picture shows a mother trying to feed the children. As you can see, the living condition is totally bad. The food on which they are being fed, it is not of a good diet. And the next picture shows these are the children here. Due to poor diet, they are in bad conditions. And the next picture shows children in a classroom. And really the conditions within a classroom are not conducive. You know, there are some classrooms, you can see there are about even plus 50 students in one classroom, you know, and the education system is really not of one that can be happy. The next slide is finding freedom as an international student within an institution. For me, this really touched my heart to the manner in which I was treated, to say, you know. I was so excited to have obtained the temporary visa, but little did I know that it wasn't going to be easy in finding opportunities. Having completed my high school in South Africa, I was so excited. Oh yeah, another chance for me to further my studies at a university. Having already submitted my application for varsity, when it was time for registration, the ladies at the student admission, they told me that they will have to send my result for verification. In which I was so surprised, as also said, as to how Why should you send my result for further verification, yet I studied in South Africa? You know, all this is due to the fact that my results were not made available online to the institution due to not having proper documentation, example, like an ID. But being a man that I am, a courageous person, full of determination, I did not give up. You know, I even tried going to see a lawyer at the Refugee Social Services in Durban. And the lawyer, thanks to them, they gave me a letter in which I could present to the institution. You know, so happy receiving a letter, knowing, okay, finally doors are open for me and I'll be registered. But no, the lady told me, no, we won't accept the letter and we will wait for your result to be verified. I was sad again as to why all this, like time was running out. Then I had no choice. I had to wait until my results were verified. But surprisingly, my results were verified, but I had to go and remind them to check the emails. And eventually, I was registered, but late, and classes had already started. To the next slide, suggestions. I would like to make a suggestion to the UKZN leadership to please create a fundraising for refugees for the purpose of assisting refugee students academically. This funding will assist in offloading the financial burden that comes with education, as our parents are not financially stable. An example of this can be, I had a friend of mine, his name is Delegi. We finished high school together. He was a smart person, 4 distinctions, and he was accepted at a university to do civil engineering. But little did he know that he would only do 1 year at that university due to funding. You know, come to his 2nd year, he didn't have enough means to pay for his balance that he was owing on the previous year. So he couldn't register, he was blocked, and he was forced to abandon his dreams. And now as we speak, he told me, Chris, there's nothing I can do. He left Durban, he's in Eastern Cape, and he chose to open something like a small shop, like, you know, like a fried chips. And yeah, so it's really tough to see someone who had a dream, but due to funding, he couldn't. And for me, that really, it was bad for me, because knowing we both had a dream to fulfill, but for him, he couldn't. And to my second point, and my second suggestion, it would be appreciated if more opportunities such as internship and work in integrated learning are made available. And these opportunities should also cater for refugees. University system should work closely with the Department of Basic Education, whereby universities should be able to gain access to the result of the refugee student just by entering the DVN or the DVR number, because our identity numbers are made up of letters and numbers. And this can, and this takes back to my example, whereby I nearly lost a dream due to my asylum seeker. You know, I did my studies here. You could really see my statement. It had a South African logo, but I was told that they will have to send my result for verification. So for me, that was really disappointing, because I believe that once a student finished the grade 12, when the results are published, universities should have that access. You know, just by entering the student DVN number, you can have the student result. You know, this is really a concern, because students, they don't need just to have an ID, but just by entering the DVN number, because the DVN number is a mixture of letters and numbers, you know. So to me, these are really my suggestions that I would love to see, you know, being taken care of and put much attention, because many students are losing opportunities and they have to wait to get into university. You know, once you apply, you might not get an offer because the university cannot access your result, because your ID number has a mixture of letters and numbers. So if the Department of Basic Education can work closely with the university and allow the university to have access to the student details just by using the DBA number, and work opportunities should be created for refugees as well. And fundraising should cater for refugees. For me, that's, well, make me happiest man. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christoph. We really appreciate hearing your journey. Those slides you share are very moving. And yes, some of your recommendations hopefully can be implemented, but we'll hear from UKZN what the policies are, because as Yasmin pointed out, everything is about documentation and that paper.
Yeah,
So,
true.
you know, it's a real conundrum. And so let's just, as just a summary, from our first panelist, the issue of rights, human rights, that refugees and asylum seekers are also human and their rights should be respected. And he outlined certain declarations and policies that should be really put in place. And the point is about having an inclusive society so that it's not just us and them, those in the periphery and those who have access to resources. But the whole issue, as Yasmin pointed out, is about the documentation. And as she rightly put, documentation is the road to freedom. If your child born here can't get that birth certificate, then really they don't have access to most things. So we're back to then that human rights. What are the rights of children who are born of refugee parents? And I liked the idea that she presented that, you know, we need to actually lobby government and sign these petitions so that this issuing of documents shouldn't take years. I see in the chat that some documents can take up to 14 years. And what happens in the interim? And so, you know, we really have a huge conundrum here, and there are lots of really good questions in the chat. And I think the three panelists can see which one they're most comfortable in answering. Some questions have been answered already, but I'll still bring them up just so that the audience is aware of the gravity that some are sitting with. So for example, the students from Sudan have indicated that their student visas will expire at the end of the year. But since there's a war in Sudan, they can't go back, even get their passport issued. And they have an advice to seek asylum. And we've heard from Yasmin that that whole journey of asylum seeking isn't such a straightforward journey. And so we're back to Christoph. What then happens with their registration and finishing up their studies? And Yasmin has recommended that they approach the lawyers for human rights at the Diakonia Center. So I'm not sure if everyone knows where these offices are, but perhaps it might be useful to just indicate them in the chat so that people can see where they are. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything about the students from Sudan who won't have their study visas or renew their passports. Is there anyone else who wants to add to that? All right, okay. And then there's a question to our first panelist. What's the right of housing in your context? How many refugees have been provided with housing from South Africa leadership as one of their rights? So I don't know if Kromsa has these statistics, but do you want to Fulu, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the two speakers that have just spoken and for your analysis after we have spoken. Maybe I should make this disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer by profession. I'm an activist. So some of the legal interpretation needs the legal background and legal-minded people. On the question of the right to housing, you will know that constitutionally, in terms of Section 26, subsection 1, it clearly states that everyone has the right to have access to adequate housing. And it even goes further to illustrate that the state must take reasonable measures to make sure that that right is realizable. And if you look at the context of the kind of houses that we have in South Africa that are provided by the government, we normally refer to them as RDP houses. Whereas there is no such thing called RDP houses. It's a benefit within the RDP policy. If you remember the 1994 reconstruction and development policy. And when you look at that policy, it was established to mitigate the gaps that the South Africans has actually faced in terms of accessing housing. And we also have what we call the National Housing Act. I think it's 1997, if I'm not mistaken. So those are some of the policies that have been put in place. But in terms of the policy, the RDP policy that was introduced, it then clearly stated that the benefit or the preference will be provided to the South African first. But those are some of the issues that maybe we need to be taking up forward and say, what about the constitutional challenge, or what about the constitutional constraint between the RDP policy and the National Housing Act vis-a-vis the South African Constitution? Because the South African Constitution clearly states that everyone, and we think that everyone, we are inclusive of refugees and asylum seekers, as Yasmin has rightfully indicated, that once the documentation becomes an integral part, then access to housing also forms part, because you will remember that asylum seekers and refugees, they are basically on a temporary permit. And when they are on a temporary permit, and then the house that is provided within the RDP policy is provided on a permanent basis. So there is a bit of a contradiction between the two policies. Maybe it's an issue that we need to take up as activists and people working within the migration. But when it comes to issues of statistics, I don't want to lie, I'm not aware of any statistics when it comes to that. Maybe we should do some research and engage the National Department of Housing in terms of finding out how many refugees and asylum seekers, including economic migrants, who have got access to the RDP houses that are being provided by the government. And you will see, and you have witnessed that in many occasions, asylum seekers and refugees, they resort to residential areas that are rentals that belong to private owners, because those are easily accessible, because it's a two-way agreement. Yes, Ashwin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Fulu. One of the guests has responded to the students from Sudan that can they try and work out something through their embassy. Perhaps that's a channel to resolve their problem. Yes, I don't know if there's a Sudanese embassy in South Africa, but it might be worth following up on that. All right. Yasmin has answered some important questions, but perhaps Yasmin, you can elaborate further. The question was about the RAB hearing. How long does it take to get an outcome after appearing for the Refugee Appeal Board? And you indicated that some people have been waiting 14 to 15 years. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about that and what the alternative, or is there an alternative?
Okay. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so unfortunately, like Fulu, the answer I give is just from experience. A number of people, I think since about 2017, around 90% of new applications for asylum get rejected, and these then go into most of the people will appeal. We have, like I said, we have progressive laws and progressive legislation that we do have the option of appealing. Up until about 3 or 4 years ago, there were just 3 people that sat on the appeal board, and they had hundreds of thousands of appeals to see to. A lot of those hearings were held. A lot of the decisions were reserved. I think they weren't made. But recently, I think about, and Fulu can maybe correct me, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, the Department of Home Affairs started what is known as a backlog project, and the aim was to deal with, and they chose a number, I think it was 153,000 appeal cases. They were supported by the UNHCR to get rid of this backlog of appeal cases, because we had people waiting like 15 years for an appeal hearing or an appeal decision. And they've been recently supposedly speeding up the appeals. I know they employed more lawyers and they strengthened the whole appeal board, but what we know also is that it's still very, very slow. So whether there's an option for waivers, I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer, but I think if you approach the Lawyers for Human Rights that are here at Diaconia Center, which is at 20 Diaconia Avenue in central Durban. I think if you Google it, it's pretty easy to find. And in the building, you'll find Lawyers for Human Rights, you'll find ourselves, which is Refugee Social Services, and you'll find one other organization that actually works with refugees, that's Church World Services as well. So if you come to Diaconia Center, you pretty much will find people that are working with refugees here. But the lawyers should be able to tell you what your other options are that might be available to you if you're on appeal. I know, and maybe this is something just relating to the documentation again, if you were born to refugee parents or foreign parents that are foreign nationals, and your birth was registered and you haven't left the country and you've attained the age of 18, you can actually apply for citizenship directly. And recently, the regulations came into being to make that process. I mean, that policy came in 2013, but it hadn't been properly managed by Home Affairs. But I know, with court action and stuff, things have changed somewhat. There was recently the regulations came out. So, it should be a little easier to actually get that done. So that's another option. If the person is over 18 and has a birth certificate, stating that they were born in South Africa.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yasmin. I see all the questions. Let's just take a hand from the guests. Antoinette Demant, do you want to unmute and ask your question, please? Is she able to? All right, let's go back to the Q&A. Please, panelists, when you're speaking, remember to turn on your camera. Okay, another difficult question, Mr. Situmule. We know your disclaimer is there, but I'll still ask 2 questions. Do you think there is any credibility to the allegations that there is significant abuse of the asylum seeker refugee system in South Africa? Those who make this claim often say that many asylum seekers in South Africa are often economic migrants, and that this is not covered by the definition he outlined. Then a second follow-up question, I guess it's a different kind of question, but if you can take the 2 together. The second question is, does your organization direct any of their capacity building to the asylum seekers, refugees, and other immigrants in order for them to know their responsibilities alongside their rights. So I think the issue of education that was pointed out. So please, Hulu.
Thank you very much. I like the way the participants asked the question and used the word allegations within the question. Because that remains an allegation, because we have heard of those allegations that maybe some other economic migrants, they do apply or use the asylum seeker system in order for them to be documented, but that remains an allegation. It has never been proven in a reason that there's never been a study that was commissioned or a research that was conducted in terms of unpacking who are actually people applying to become asylum seekers and refugees. Up until such commission or such study or such investigation is conducted and confirmed, we could be able maybe to verify those allegations, but that also remains allegation. We have heard of those even on the ground level. We have even heard those from the government officials and so forth. So, but up to date, they remain allegations. Because it goes back to the issues of what Yasmini was talking about, the issue of desperation for access to documentation. Because without documentation, you can't access even a single right within the Bill of Rights. So you are all directed to the documentation for you to define yourself in terms of who you are, how you are going to survive, and where to from where you are. And then there is another question that says, does your organization directly direct any of their capacity building to asylum seekers and other immigrants in order for them to know their response? Yes. As I indicated, that in our 4 programs that we work, we have got capacity building and training. So part of the capacity building and training is to engage the direct refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants in terms of their rights and responsibility and how they should behave within the country. It's a day like this that we are commemorating, where we highlight the rights and responsibilities. Like today, I was part and parcel of the World Refugee Day commemoration here in Pretoria, led by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, where the rights for asylum seekers and refugees were highlighted and the responsibility were also highlighted. So as much as we are promoting and protecting the rights of refugees and asylum seekers, we also teach the responsibility and how they should respect the laws of the country. It is unfortunate that you can't convert a person. You can give information, but the person will have to practice the information. So those we have been conducting on the ground level. But once again, access to documentation, and that refugee right are human rights too.
Yes, we're back to this issue of documentation. And Yasmin, perhaps this question come to you. So what can be done to ameliorate the social ills related to the lack of legalizing documents for immigrants? Some extremists claim that a lot of crime committed in their areas is by undocumented immigrants. Please, Yasmin, remember to turn on your video.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Sorry about not doing the video earlier on. Yes, personally, I think government needs to listen and they need to document. It serves their purpose also to have more people documented than undocumented. That's my opinion, personal opinion, that if we want to ameliorate social ills, and you know, there's often this call that, or this my words leaving me, this comment that, you know, undocumented people commit the crimes and get away with it. Perhaps they do. Perhaps it's easy to be, you know, under the radar. But if you were to make sure that you made it simple and easy for people to get the documentation, then it would serve us as a country as well, because we would know who these people are and where they are. And I think all of us that are, you know, that work with refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants are very clear that we don't in any way support criminal activity by the people that we actually work with. Like any other community, there's criminals in every community, and none of us sitting on this panel today will say there's no criminals within our communities at all. You know, so what I would suggest that is we need to push for documentation of everybody, and in a way that it is, you know, it's streamlined. I mean, South Africans have trouble getting their documents as well. Let's just be clear about it. I needed to get my son's ID, or my son needed to get his ID. He's 17. We stood for hours in a queue. It took us months to get an appointment. You know, it is a problem. So, yeah, basically, I would like for people to, for government to actually put more money into the Department of Home Affairs, and to make sure that they've got the right people and the right resources to streamline the process of getting documentation.
Thanks, Yasmin. Sorry, I got kicked out there for a minute. Okay, there's a question here in the chat. Jerome says that his understanding that human rights protects persons from humiliation, harm, and degradation anywhere. And he separates legal rights of the responsibility of government of that country and should not be interfered with by persons other than the government. And he claims that governments must protect human rights even when they're still dealing with the legal rights issues. Fulu, do you want to respond to this? Can you unmute and turn on your camera? Okay, maybe.
Sorry, I was talking to myself.
We all do that. Okay, go
Yes.
ahead. You heard my question.
Yes, the one that talks to my understanding. I believe that human rights protect persons from humiliation, harm, and degradation.
That's it.
Yes, of course. You will remember that human rights are principles, or are sets of principles and norms that guides one's behavior and how people should integrate and communicate and live amongst each other. So those legal rights, of course, they are the responsibility of both the government and the bearers. The bearers are the service user, who are me and you, refugees, asylum seekers, and everyone else within the Republic. But unfortunately, those rights are enforced by the judicial, which are our courts, the Constitution, and the Constitutional Court. So definitely, yes, we need to be finding pathways in terms of how do we hold accountable those people or those authorities that don't account for any human rights violation or any wrongdoing or any discrimination that comes or arises within the human rights violation, because human rights cannot be substituted. They are permanently, I'm looking for a right word, they are permanently inexistent, and they protect and give us guidance in terms of how we should conduct ourselves in a legal way that is acceptable by the country statute and the country authorities. So definitely that's how I perceive the human rights as a legal right issue.
Thank you. I think that's straight to the point. And I think we've taken all the questions in the Q&A and in the chat.
There was a question.
Yeah,
there
go
was
ahead.
a question there directed to Yasmin that says, can anyone enter South Africa without visa?
I think Yasmin answered that one.
Yes, and there was another issue before maybe we finish that you asked if I can add from Yasmin relating to the Refugee Appeals Board. Yes, In 2021, UNHCR and Home Affairs, they collaborated to introduce what we call Refugee Appeals Authority to focus on over 150,000 backlog that was sitting before the Refugee Appeals Authority. So it's up to now the organization and people like you and me to actually follow it up with either the Home Affairs or the UNHCR to see how far they have fast-tracked the elevation of the backlog. And there was also the amendment of the Refugee Appeals Authority regulation to make sure that the refugee appeals processes, they flow and they become effective, and that the people who sit within the Refugee Appeals Authority, they can actually see more cases per day than what is currently taking place. So those are some of the issues that needs to be followed up and engaged to make sure that we alleviate this backlog and people can get access to documentation so that they can unlock the access to human rights and gain protection within the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, do you want to share anything in light of some of the discussion? Because I think as a student and as a young person who's gone through this journey, just remember to unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity. Listening to everything that has been discussed, from a student perspective, I know guys, I know it is not easy. At times you feel like things are not going my way. You feel like people are not really listening to your appeals and stuff. But personally, for me, what I will give as an advice is that ensure that you have proper documentation, right? And most importantly, follow the right channels. Follow the right channels. Seek advice to the right people. Yeah, I know it is not an easy journey, and we all need to know that we leave our homes coming into a different country, and there are rules that we have to follow. In as much as we want people to attend to us, but at the same time, we need to follow the protocols. Yeah, and in closing, I will encourage students to visit the Refugee Social Services. If you have any help, if you need any help, if you're facing any difficulties, seek with them, and I believe they will surely help you. Because I'm sure that they were once there before you. So there's nothing that is new. Yeah, and like to my, I'll be really happy that the refugees are really, they are really attended to. More opportunities are given. Because our parents, they are not financially stable to really cater for us, and we have to go out there and really make it in life. The background that we are coming from, it is not really conducive, and we have brothers and sisters that are looking up to you. So if no excuse to fail. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. Sorry, it bumped me out again. Thanks very much, Chris. And I think I'll now hand back the meeting to Corporate Affairs. Yolisa.
Thank you, Dr. Kondo. I just want to say thank you to our panelists for an insightful session this afternoon. We recognize the strength and empathize with those who've been displaced and forcibly removed from their home countries. There's some scary stats out there in terms of how many people have been displaced from their homes. The UNHCR says that there are about 108.4 million displaced people who have fled their homes due to conflict. And more than 40% of those are children under the age of 18. This crisis, as highlighted by our speakers, highlights the urgent need for organizations, including our government and communities, to create opportunities and nurturing environments for those who've been displaced. To Dr. Opondo, thank you for leading the session so eloquently and effortlessly. Your time today is really appreciated. To our team behind the scenes, to Pam Adams for organizing this insightful webinar, and Musantuli for handling the technical aspects of the webinar. And lastly, thank you to the audience as well for joining us this afternoon and for taking the time out of your busy day to be a part of this webinar. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.